Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Spiritual Journalist. I'm so grateful you found us here, and I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Tiffany Bedolla. She is a neuromuscular CMT, but more importantly, she is a healer, and she has agreed to join us to talk all about mushrooms today. This is a conversation I've been wanting to have for a really long time and waiting for the right person to enter my awareness to talk about it. And when I learned about Tiffany, I knew she would be the perfect person to have this conversation. Not only are we going to discuss why mushrooms get the nickname magic mushrooms, what's the magic all about, what's the spiritual element all about, but we're also going to have a very real discussion about the medicinal properties of mushrooms. What happens in our body when we consume them, and how does it alter our mental state? So we're going to get into all of that in just a moment. Here we go. I've always been a deeply curious person, talking with anyone who would listen and soaking in as much information as possible. So it's no surprise my love for storytelling led me to a career in journalism. But after nearly a decade working in newsrooms across the West Coast, I realized I wanted to start asking questions you probably wouldn't see on your local news. So I left my job as a morning TV reporter and started The Spiritual Journalist. This isn't just a YouTube channel, podcast, website, or social media page. This is a live conversation where you get to ask questions too, because I'm not the expert. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. My goal is to connect you with people who have profound experiences and inspirational stories to share. And we'll definitely mix a little astrology in too. So if you're like me, you have this insatiable curiosity and you love deep conversations too, well, this is the place for you. Together each week, we'll explore everything from crystals and tarot to mental health and the environment. There are no wrong questions here. My ultimate goal is for you to come away from each episode with a new perspective and an expanded consciousness. This is a channel for the collective. This is a community for the curious. This is The Spiritual Journalist. Hello.
Hi, Olivia.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Me too.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we start all of these episodes with a quick look at our guest's birth chart. I think it's just a fun way to get a snapshot of your energy. Of course, we'll get into all of your qualifications and your background. So here's your chart.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
And so you are a Taurus sun, which means your birthday is coming up. Taurus season starts tonight, and I'm so excited that we have you on to start off our Taurus season. And you also have your Mercury in Taurus in the third house. So Mercury's in a strong placement in the third house, but you probably have a very grounded way of communicating, and you probably really think things through before you say them or decide to enter the conversation. And what's cool is that because Mercury is in Taurus right now, you are having your Mercury return. Perfect timing for you to be coming on, sharing your knowledge with us, especially about plant medicine, which is very much earthy in that Taurus vibe. So you're an earth sign, probably very connected to nature, and being a Taurus is very about the physical and about the body, which makes total sense that your work, how you show up in the world, is very much related to helping people with their bodies and kind of manipulating the physical form in a lot of ways. But what's really interesting is that your moon and your rising are both in Aquarius. So very different energy from Taurus. Aquarius is kind of the alien. It's very out there, very otherworldly, not grounded at all. So there's probably part of you that's very spiritual and kind of odd. You're probably I'm kind of a weirdo behind closed doors. I show up as this very calm, grounded presence. But the real me that people don't see is kind of a freak. Not in a bad way, in the best possible way. And your Aquarius rising as well, kind of your essence, how you show up is oh, that person's a little different. You might be kind of quiet or floating around the peripheral. You might not be the first to really interject yourself or be very bold when you walk in a room, but you're observing, you're taking things in, and there's a it's like you're very different than everybody else, and you kind of know that. What's interesting though is that your Mars over here is opposing your moon. So your Mars is in Leo. So once you decide to take action, once you set your mind to something, you're like bold, you're going after it. It might even be like the drama, like you're just like, you made up your mind and you are going full speed ahead towards something with a lot of pride and a lot of ambition. So you have kind of this interesting duality playing out in your chart of like, there's this calm presence, but then there's part of you that like wants to do things differently and take action once you make your decision, once you're steadfast in what you're doing. So yeah, you're going to have a lot of activation coming up really soon here too, because Venus is about to move into Aries. You have your Venus in Aries. Like what's going on in the next couple of weeks is going to feel very at home for you, very natural for you. It's going to coincide with a lot of the placements in your own chart. And you have your Saturn in Aquarius too. So you're also going through your Saturn return right now. Same with me. And that means that we're learning a lot of big lessons. There's some big life shifts coming for us, specifically with your Saturn being in your first house. Once your Saturn return is over, probably after mid-2023, you're probably going to have a whole renewed sense of purpose and sense of self with the lessons that you're moving through right now. So just a little preview. This ended up being more of like a snapshot of how the current energy is affecting you, but that's because you're like so aligned with the current energy.
So much energy.
There's a lot of energy right now, for sure. So yeah, I love this for you. It's very symbolic of what we'll talk about today, and I'm really excited to get into it. So let's jump right in without further ado. I want to start at the beginning of your journey with mushrooms. When were you first introduced to them, and how were you first introduced to them?
So just right off the bat, I'm already very heavily involved with herbal plant medicine, just from being a child and growing up in Mexico City with homeopathic remedies. That was our go-to. That's how we grow up. We don't really go to the doctor unless it's something really, really serious. Where in Western medicine, we're taught differently, and it's just a completely different system. So coming over here, I lived in Chicago. I was born in Chicago, where it's very straight edge over there. No cannabis, none of that. And when I came to California, that's when I started kind of dabbling a little bit more into the other world of plant medicine, which to me was cannabis and other recreational drugs that were very highly stigmatized. There was no healing to be found there, just as far as what we had been taught. So it was almost scary going into it, but I suffered from severe insomnia. I could not sleep. Which totally affected the way that I functioned throughout the day. And moving to California, I developed migraines, really severe migraines, which added to the insomnia. And I was just trying to find some relief. So after going to the doctors, of course, we all know the story. They just don't really listen to you. They try to get you on medication that at the end of the day doesn't really help, maybe numbs you up a little bit, but it just doesn't make you feel like yourself. So after finding cannabis, helping me sleep, that was one of the biggest things that it helped me in. And later on, when I became a massage therapist, I started using it to make cannabis rubs and creams to help inflammation in joints, and just really amazing remedies that you just mix with plants. I love mixing rosemary in with cannabis. But down that road, a few years after opening my practice, one of my very good friends who was studying psychology at the time and trying to find remedies for her own depression and anxiety, she found mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, and started growing them herself, because again, we don't really trust when it comes to these type of medicines, getting them off the street or getting them from someone we don't know. And we were already on a path of healing where, we're eating organic, we know where our source is, everything that we're getting from, and we're trying to be really mindful in our healing. And that includes knowing the source of everything that we're getting, ingesting, putting in our bodies. So she grew her first round of mushrooms and she gave me some. And I did all my research before taking them because I was so scared. I'm like, I know this isn't like cannabis at all. It's a completely different experience. So, you go on Reddit, you read about other people's experiences, and I chose Yosemite to have my very first mushroom trip because after you read that, you're going to have visuals and you want to be in a safe place and you want to maybe have a person with you to make sure that you're okay, which I did. And it was the most magical, transformational thing that I've ever experienced. And just knowing all of the things that were going on in my brain, maybe from past trauma, and doing the research, one of the biggest things that mushrooms does is neurogenesis. So throughout our life, when we experience trauma, different parts of our brains gets damaged by stress and other chemicals, adrenaline, and different things depending on the stress levels that we grow up with. So when those parts of our brain are damaged, we lose different types of function, like our serotonin levels are messed up because that's where we produce serotonin, which is a mood stabilizer. So people that suffer from depression, anxiety, we don't know where the root of the trauma is. We just know that our brain is messed up, it's glitching out, and we need to help it. So mushrooms was something that I found was just amazing because it did it almost instantly. It was a big trip that I took. I didn't start with microdosing. I just kind of took a big trip. I think it was about 3 or 2.5 grams that I took. And it was amazing. I really recommend reading about it first if you're thinking about doing anything, because the environment that you're in is very important, and it's also going to set almost like a foundation for how you want your brain to feel afterwards. So being in a really nice setting, and Yosemite out of all places it was amazing for me. So yeah.
Right. They say anytime you're doing any sort of psychedelic, set and setting, that's like the guidelines. Or I think really anytime you're trying something for the first time, like regardless of if it's a drug or not, set and setting is something to keep in mind. So, we'll kind of talk about how you have facilitated mushroom journeys for people, but how important is it, do you think, to have someone who is not necessarily partaking or has done this before with you, and having a space where you also feel comfortable?
Yeah, it's super important. I have like a whole little thing that I write down. I have a big guideline, almost like a packet of 3 pages. But one of the biggest things is you want to make sure that you're comfortable, that you're wearing comfy clothing, because your awareness increases when you're on mushrooms. All of a sudden, you're seeing things that you didn't see before. And maybe that sweater that you're wearing is now all of a sudden a little itchy because it has polyester in it, and you didn't know, but cotton all of a sudden feels better to your skin cells because you're aware of it. And throughout our work-life balance, when work and stress take over, we start to lose that awareness and we become numb. And sometimes we don't become aware, like, oh crap, I'm depressed, or I'm not dealing with my anxiety the way that I should, or I'm not as happy as I could be. So mushrooms really helps to bring things inward and help you heal them in a really nice, natural manner, as we spoke. No bad hangovers, or I don't know, crazy things, as we know with other pharmaceuticals or just plants.
Absolutely. And I want to say before we talk anymore that this is not medical advice, to definitely do your own research and make sure, like Tiffany said, that you're getting things from a good source, that you have good intentions behind what you're doing. And I think that's a great point as well. Anytime I've done any sort of psychedelic journey, I've been lucky enough to have people who kind of introduced me to these modalities that are very intentional spiritual people. And it's, we always like literally set our intention into whatever we're doing before consuming it. Do you tend to do that as well? Kind of make it a spiritual journey, regardless of, again, like this could be for getting a massage or for taking mushrooms?
Oh yeah. One of my biggest things is like, it's the little things, because even the words that you say, everything that you put out into the world, it's energy. So I read this morning, don't eat food from people that hate their job, because if they're not liking their job and they're putting that in the food and you're eating it, It's like, you don't want that. And it's true. And, speaking again about mushrooms, and they originate from Oaxaca. In Oaxaca, all of their food, part of their culture is that you make it from scratch because you're infusing all of that wonderful energy and you're going to feed it to your family. So everything from scratch, you're making things with your hands, and it's just a beautiful meal infused with amazing energy that's nourishing.
Let's talk about that, the origin of the magic mushroom, because I did not know this until I just chatted with you before we went live. So, magic mushrooms actually became popular because of a woman in Oaxaca.
Yeah, Maria Sabina. She is a woman, which I'm sure, just before we speak about her, I'm sure there were other tribes and other cultures that were utilizing it, but she became kind of like the catalyst for everything because hippies started backpacking over there. Oaxaca is very, very beautiful. And as they went out there, they found the mushroom lady. And she was just a very happy and open lady who wanted to share this with the world. And a lot of times the villagers didn't like that because, it's a small community and then you have all these outsiders that don't speak their language coming in and, who likes that? Colonizers, right? But anyways, she became very big to the point that the CIA was very interested in the mushroom medicine. But personally, I had a client who was actually a child when and lived in the village with Maria Sabina. And something that she told me that was very interesting, which they don't mention in books or in things about Maria, is that she not only ingested them and used them as medicine, but she used them also like crystals. So she would place them around people's bodies and use them in that way of healing, place them on, like the chakras and crystals. So I thought that was really interesting because that's not, I don't have the quantity available to do all that, but it's amazing that she did and that she would practice in that way because we're still learning so much about them. I myself am only extremely familiar with 3 of the psilocybin strain mushrooms, which there were so many more, but for me to say that I truly know what these 3 do in their own individual, system, that's a whole other thing because we're always learning. And one of the biggest things that I say right now, where we're living, we've never had so much technology available. We've never been as smart as we are. We're at the peak of everything. So adding mushrooms, I think it's a no-brainer because we need this very, very essential healing. We're so advanced in so many other ways. And it's like our brain needs help.
Seriously. So, okay, there's so many places I want to take this conversation. But first, I want to go back to your original experience. You said it was life-changing, so beautiful. Can you describe to us what you saw and what you experienced your first time using mushrooms?
And going back to the setting, I think it was just so important that I did it in Yosemite because when you're out there, you're in the middle of no technology. You get no signal, but you're just in deep, deep nature. And not just any nature. Yosemite is beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. So I was able to feel a connection to the earth and the trees and the leaves and the water and an appreciation that I've never had before. An awareness that I didn't have before. Things sparkled. I almost had like an HD vision. I looked at my hands. I could see all of my grooves. I could just go back and also have a meditation moment where you go and you almost examine yourself in third person. And you go back in time in your brain of experiences that maybe damaged you or were good for you, or maybe you didn't see it in that way before. And it just opens up your world completely. So you're able to move on, you're able to have empathy for yourself, and that's where the real healing happens.
Oh, so beautiful, seriously. And we'll get into like the physiology of what happens. I know that you are very familiar with the human body and all the systems, and we'll explain that. But I want to talk to you about the spiritual, kind of the magical side of magic mushrooms. And I know you're a spiritual person. You create crystal grids and altars, and you work with all these healing modalities in your business. And I think that's so beautiful. What do you think it is about mushrooms that activates this sense of spirituality within us? Even like what you said about, Maria, her using them as like crystals. It's like almost there's this frequency or something associated with mushrooms.
Yeah, you said it. It's a frequency, it's a vibration. And the best way that I describe it is because they almost even look like USBs. It's like a USB from Mother Earth to you. And when you take that, you are getting nothing but the truth of what your connection is to Mother Earth. Sometimes your path is shown, like, this is what you need to do. And a lot of people, it's too much work. So they like to forget their mushroom trips, and they can be pretty overwhelming sometimes. But at the end of the day, they're going to show you the truth of it all. They're going to connect you to nature, and they're going to heal parts of your brain that maybe you didn't even realize needed attention. So once you have that awareness, you're able to, once you're off mushrooms, you're able to keep on going and just learn from them. So it's a really great relationship.
Yeah, I just got chills when you said it's like a USB connecting you to nature, because even in just my microdosing experiences, I haven't done a full journey. I feel that so much. And same with my partner, like one time he was microdosing and he was like, I have to be outside right now. Like I literally have to be in nature. I cannot stay inside. It's like this pull, it feels like, to be, like you said, why it was so beautiful that you did it in Yosemite, to like be in nature and really like feel that connection, because truly we are nature, right? Like we are a product of nature. And I feel like taking mushrooms almost like connects us to the network of mushrooms on the earth. So I don't know, have you seen the movie Fantastic Fungi? It's
Yeah,
on
I've
Netflix.
seen bits and parts of it, yes.
If you haven't
The
seen it and you're
network,
watching
the
this,
network, everything's connected.
the mycelium, right? And the first time I watched it, I had already dabbled in mushrooms, but it completely changed my perspective about them and about the power of them. And like I said, if you haven't watched it, you have to watch it. It's your assignment. Like, do it as soon as you can. But essentially, mushrooms are not just the things that we forage that pop out of the earth. They're a whole intertwined network of electricity and signals that they send, not only between other mushrooms, but between trees and plants, essentially creating like a grid around the entire earth of energy. And to me, at least, this is not scientific, this is just my take, it almost feels like when you consume them, you become part of that grid. Like you can feel all of the connection of the mycelium. Do you kind of feel that?
I do. I really do. And it might be weird, but you almost feel connected to everything in nature a lot more. Like all my plants that I have in here, I feel like I have a better relationship with them somehow. And there is a science to it, because it sounds really crazy when we talk about this, but there are frequencies. They've made studies that we know that plants talk to each other. We know that they love music. So it's not crazy. And it's actually very, very logical to think that way, because that is what we're feeling and experiencing. So yeah, mushrooms are amazing, and I can't wait for them to be out in the world more in our communities.
Yes. So let's talk about the science behind it, because you're right, we are getting on this like it's so beautiful and we're so connected to earth, which is, it is honestly true. Like one of my last experiences microdosing, I was out by the river up in Colfax and just with my best friend, and I just noticed, I looked around and I saw like squirrels, I could just see like little bits of life that I wouldn't have noticed before, and had all these like revelations about my connection and my purpose and all the things.
Yeah.
But what was going on in my body? Because that's what we want to know. What physiologically happens when we consume mushrooms?
So just like I said, there's a lot of different types of mushrooms, and even with non-psychoactive ones, we have your reishi, lion's mane, turkey tail. You have so many. So I would have to know exactly what you took to know what the purpose, because each mushroom does have a different function. So for example, the golden teacher is very, very mellow, and they call that mushroom the golden teacher for a reason, because it does put you in a state of thinking and guidance, almost like having your own personal teacher with you when you take that mushroom. There's another one, penis envy, which is one of the most popular ones and one of the very, very strong strains. I would even say that's more on the recreational side if you want to take it in small doses. But that one can definitely be a little bit strong. It can take you all the way up there. And if you're not ready for it, so as far as the physiological effects, the biggest thing that I know does happen with any mushroom that you take, they are in part an adaptogen. So they're going to find the parts of your brain that are messed up, that have scar tissue, whether it be from stress, physical trauma, or just trauma growing up, because that does cause scars and PTSD. So that's what the mushrooms do. They create neurogenesis and new cells in the areas of our brains that have been damaged so that they can function properly, so that we can memorize things. Because that's one of the biggest things when we have things wrong in our brain and stress. Our memories get messed up because of the hypothalamus, and just all of the stress that happens can sometimes bring back the PTSD. So even with microdosing, oh my gosh, it can make a world of a difference as how you function throughout your day, because of the awareness that it brings to, like you said, oh, now I'm paying attention to the squirrels and the trees, and I'm not like stuck in this mindset that I've been stuck in for so long. So it creates new patterns for your memory.
Yeah, and it's just like, I think microdosing especially, I think the reason I haven't done a full journey is because I'm like, this is great. Like, life is just beautiful when you microdose, like, why would I mess with something that's so wonderful? But I will say, there's always, I don't want to say a risk factor, but like a window of like, we're not exactly sure how it's going to affect you. And that goes for full blown journeys as well. And so, I want to address bad trips or negative experiences people can have with this kind of plant medicine. And, what's your take on that? And what advice do you have for people when it comes to negative experiences?
Personally, I have not had any, or anyone in my circle that I know of, on mushrooms. On other psychedelics, yes. And the closest things that I can say to almost having a bad trip was when I was sitting one of my clients, and I'll go ahead and just share the story of, we did a trip. So a client of 3 years finally decided that she wanted to get over this fear. She had very, very severe anxiety of getting into a vehicle and driving again, because she'd been in a very severe car accident where the person behind her, unfortunately, had an episode, started strangling the driver, and they crashed. So it was such a horrible episode that she just didn't want to drive anymore. So, of course, job was affected, mood was affected, self-esteem, all of these things that just made the one accident even worse. She went from living on her own to having to move back in with her parents, and just needed that extra support at the time. So after seeing me for a few years, she decided that she wanted to try mushrooms. She wanted me to help her through a sitting trip. And one of the biggest things that she also said was the anxiety that she had was so bad that she couldn't go into a restaurant to eat. And she really wanted to go back and sit in a restaurant like a normal person, and enjoy herself. So during the trip, we started off slow. I had a whole itinerary. We went out to Old Sacramento, just a nice little walk. We went over the bridge. We went to the beach, and we were probably gone about 20 minutes, and that was enough. She's like, I'm ready to go back. I feel a little overwhelmed. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm here for you. Let's walk back. But as we're walking through the tunnel, I see her looking at the artwork and really like trying to submerge herself in all of the murals that are everywhere. And once we made it back to the office, there was some purging, which does happen. And it's interesting because she had not eaten anything since the night before, just some chicken noodle soup. But the purging that was happening was like so much. And afterwards, she told me, she's like, I went through a pretty bad alcoholism phase. So I'm like, okay, that could make some sense as to why all of that purging happened when obviously she hadn't drank in such a long time. So it wasn't necessarily a bad trip, but there was a lot of things that she wasn't expecting and that I wasn't expecting during the trip of like, okay, maybe she didn't want to be out as much. And we were really trying, she was really trying to push herself because she wanted to feel like herself again. But at the end of the day, with me being the facilitator, I'm like, I want you to feel safe. Let's go back to where you feel safe in the office. And then when the trip ended, I drove her home. And when she got in the car, I'll never forget because the trip was over. She was all calm, just kind of tired. She's like, oh my God, it feels like before the accident. And she was sitting in the car and she was just normal. So I get emotional when I talk about it because it's a really big change. And it was just so immediate to where every time she'd get in a car, she would go like this and go in a corner because of how stressed being in a vehicle would make her. So anyways, when I drove her back home, she was sitting upright and she's like, oh my gosh, I feel like before the accident. So that was huge for me. And I think after facilitating that, I'm like, I have to keep going.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to acknowledge, like we talked about, having an intention, and that intention can just be to have fun, or connect with nature. It doesn't have to be this like transformative experience every time that you decide to journey with mushrooms or microdose or whatever. But it's like, even though she had part of her experience be not the most comfortable thing, it actually was aiding her in her transformation, and it was supporting that original intention to clear these things that have been holding her back. And it's interesting because I think you could use the same kind of mushroom 40 times and have a different experience with it every single time. Like, for example, one of the last times I microdosed, and again, I've only microdosed, right? I'm not having these like insane journeys or anything, but I decided to go out in public and go to this art show. And we thought it would be so cool because there's art and, like very much immersive. But the vibe of the art show was very dark. And like the music was very dark and everything felt like dark is the best way I can describe it. And immediately when I walked in, I had to put my hands up like this and I could not take them down. I was like, I have to protect my energy. So it's like that level of awareness that you gain and feeling connected to everything can be so beautiful if you're in a beautiful setting and you're relaxed. But it's like that level of hyper awareness, I think, is where the like bad trip comes from, because I was starting to get paranoid. I was picking up on all these subtleties. I was seeing things in the art that were bringing out darkness in my own mind that I was not prepared to confront. And I was safe. I was with people who were supportive and made me feel safe. But I think there is a level of unexpectedness that you have to be prepared for anytime you're going to do a psychedelic, even if you're just doing a microdose, Yeah. So, we've talked about the physiology, how the mushrooms can literally basically they awaken neurons in parts of our brains that have been kind of quiet previously.
Yeah, or scar tissue. So much scar tissue develops in the brain. Cortisol is a hormone, but it's also a poison. So every time we go into fight or flight response, our brain floods with that. And literally, it's like a sponge that gets submerged in poison. So not all the neurons are going to make it when all of that happens. And then if it's happening again and again, if you had a traumatic childhood, how many times did that happen while your little brain was trying to develop and grow? So that's where a lot of these, mental health issues come from a lot of times. But it's things that we can bring awareness to and we can help heal.
Yeah, and I think, it's not a one and done deal either. Like, you can have this amazing trip and have all these realizations, but depending on how deeply rooted your trauma is, I think it could take like dozens of times working with plant medicine to really clear things or help you heal things or awaken parts of yourself. So have you ever done like repeated sessions with clients, or have you noticed when you've done repeated journeys that different things come up for you?
I've done repeated journeys with myself, As far as my other clients, they kind of go to the route of microdosing, and it's kind of funny because, like you said, there's a lot of work that sometimes you need to do. It's not just, you take the mushroom and, oh, everything's all happy. Like, when you were even becoming aware of all the darkness that was being brought up, it's like that's effort on your part that you have to make to be aware enough to step out of a situation, and that's what it does. So it's just, yeah, it's really important that we know the dose that we're taking too before we go into a certain setting, because everyone's tolerance is super different.
Definitely. And I would say, like, knowing someone who knows what they're doing for if you're going to do it for the first time is essential, but also making sure you have like a weight or a scale and you're like actually weighing out the mushrooms, because mushroom can be huge and not weigh very much, and a mushroom can be tiny and be super dense. And so, like, just eyeballing it is not a good idea. um, but yeah, I think, like, going back to my experience, that was the only like negative-ish experience I've had. And just because it was negative, it like really opened my awareness to dark energy, which is, it's out there. Like, we like to be all love and light in the spiritual community and focus on the light and focus on the abundance and the beauty all around us. But it really forced me to like acknowledge my own energetic boundaries and the fact that there is dark energy and that it can like affect us if we're not aware of it, So just because you have a negative journey doesn't mean, or I don't even want to call it a negative journey, but an intense experience doesn't mean you don't pull anything from it. You know what I mean? Some of my best friends have had like crazy intense trips that have been really painful, but they're some of the most impactful journeys they've had.
Yeah, definitely. There's always a learning lesson.
Always a lesson, absolutely. So I'm curious what you think about the rising popularity of mushrooms. I think that's kind of like a double-edged sword in a lot of ways. It's exciting that it's becoming more mainstream. What are your thoughts about this?
It's good and bad, because just like you mentioned with the bad trip, if somebody just sees that, oh, it's so safe and mainstream and out here, and I'm just going to go get it from my neighbor who doesn't really know much, but he grows them, and that's when it's like, oh man, I don't want to do this. This totally gave me a horrible experience. And who knows, if they were introduced to it the right way, they could have really helped, I don't know, their anxiety or just mood stabilizing, sleep, whatever it is that they're looking for to help their lifestyle. That's the only downside that I really see to it. And also the fact that marketing and commercializing a lot of times doesn't push that the source is so important. Like, they tell you all these wonderful things about it, but it's like, how did you make it? Where did you make it? What's the pureness of this quality product? Like, that's what I want to know at the end of the day, because even some of the non-psychoactive mushrooms that are out there are not real. They'll put like supplements, they'll put chalk in there or whatever other powders, and only like 3% of it is actual medicinal mushroom. So very, very important with all the buzz that's going out there that you know where your source is doing all of their magic.
It's very similar to like marijuana, I think, in a lot of ways. For the longest time, it was illegal to purchase marijuana in California. It still is illegal in a lot of places in the world. And it kind of forced this like black market to come about and force people to get their plant medicine in the form of marijuana on the streets. Now we have this system with regulations. You can literally, if you go to a dispensary, see exactly where the product was grown, how it was processed. There's so much testing, right? But just the other day, one of my friends who lives in Oakland posted to her story this sandwich board on the street in Oakland that was like, guess what? Magic mushrooms are decriminalized. Text this number and we'll come drop them off to you. And part of me is like, okay, that's really cool that it's becoming mainstream, right? That more people have access, and we have technology, we have the ability to research and do all that stuff. But part of me is also like, how do you know the mushrooms you're getting from this random number on the street aren't laced with something, aren't just like random mushrooms from the grocery store that they like, you just really don't know. So I
Yeah.
think that is kind of a concern. But I know also,
And I'll just say, if anyone's
yeah,
buying them off the street or anything, one of the biggest things that you want to look for, just because I want people to be safe, mushrooms need to be dried, like extremely, extremely well, because if they're not dried well and you feel a little bit of chewiness to it, they could have mold. And anyone that has autoimmune disorders, it's not going to do well with you. So you really need to make sure that the mushrooms that you're getting are extremely like crispy, like a potato chip. That's how the mushroom should be. Um, yeah, number one rule, I guess.
that is a great tip. And it's like important to note too, you'll learn if you watch the film Fantastic Fungi. Mushrooms and mold are part of the same family. You know what I mean? And technically, mushrooms are like a low grade poison. And there's also this movement of foraging mushrooms. You know, in the past couple years, people are going out in the forest and they're finding mushrooms and they're identifying them. But that comes with a risk as well, right? We want to like discover, I mean, people are discovering new kinds of mushrooms. It's like this really cool movement that's happening. But I know I've heard stories of people thinking they identified one mushroom and they actually misidentified it. And you can die from eating certain mushrooms. Like there is definitely a risk that comes with it.
Even me, I've seen some mushrooms growing outside because, when it rains, you see some, and I'm like, oh, let me see what kind of mushroom this is. And I'm like, oh, it's definitely this one. And you cut it up, it's like yellow. It's like, oh, no, it's not. But they look the same. And so, yeah, no, you want to be really, really careful with any type of foraging. Do it for fun. Don't ingest anything. I would not.
Do it for science. I'm sure there are like websites, you can take the pictures. They're trying to like map out where mushrooms are growing and find all the varieties, which I think is so cool. But yeah, that would make me I've never gone foraging, but yeah, it would make me very nervous to try anything just from the forest or from the nature. Yeah, but then I think you kind of talked about the commercialization too. Now we're starting to see companies come online with like little capsules you can take that are supposed to be microdoses, or even therapy that you can do online and they'll send you like a bottle of mushrooms to microdose while you do the therapy. I'm curious, as someone with a holistic practice who, is very intentional about the products you're using and the modalities you're using and the source, like we keep going back to, what are your thoughts on this commercialization of mushrooms now?
Well, kind of like cannabis also. I still get my cannabis from an heirloom source because that's what I believe in. And I can only hope that through teaching and bringing awareness, and like we're doing right now, that people can kind of reject the commercialization of it and what's not true and pure, and go with a good quality source. Because I think people, after a while, they realize when they're not getting taken care of to the fullest, or when a therapy isn't working out for them, or when something's just complete baloney. But at the end of the day, it takes away from the real therapy of things. It kind of muddles the water, which we don't like, but that's what I'm here for, to take a stand, to educate people, and I hope that others who are in this holistic field do the same. I'm currently working with an herbalist as well, because as much as I love and know a lot about it, I'm not an herbalist. So I'm working with an herbalist who does know, who has her experience, to help me put the missing pieces together and create something that's really, really meaningful, powerful, and can heal. So yes, very important.
I think so too. And I am grateful that the cannabis industry has had the trajectory it's had, because I think it does set kind of a precedence for what could happen with mushrooms, either in California or beyond. But these are mushrooms. There's a reason they're called magic mushrooms. They're like a very spiritual modality, in my opinion. They really do activate this part of us that connects us to the earth and to spirit and to source and to God, or whatever you believe in. And I don't know, I feel like some kind of the magic is kind of lost.
It's awful. Yeah, when I see people that, like, I don't know, companies growing GMO magic mushrooms, I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, and I don't even like to look at it, but who's going to stop them? They're going to do what they do. So I'm going to do what I do.
Yeah, but then at the same time, you don't want to call the guy who's advertising on the sandwich board in Oakland, because you have no idea how he's growing his mushrooms either. So, source, it feels like it's so important. And I'm curious now, you've done big journeys, you've done microdosing. What's kind of your preferred method for yourself working with mushrooms now?
It's a mix of both. I say I'll probably take a big trip um, once every 2 years, if not once a year, if I'm being called to it. I can definitely feel when I'm being called to it. But microdosing a few months out of the year when I'm feeling in a rut, like I need some extra support, because I do feel like there's supplements. And like you said, you don't get hooked on it. It's not something that you feel like you need, but they're there and they're there to help you. And when I do feel like I'm down or I need that extra help, that's when I microdose. And yeah, but other than that, I do enjoy the bigger trips better.
Well, and then, mushrooms in general, not even just the magic ones, are becoming more popular as like a health food supplement, like you mentioned, reishi and things like that. I know you're all about the body and about health with the work that you do. What's your take on those? Because it kind of feels like some of the products that are coming online are very watered down, or they're like using these
Totally.
terms to sell more and to make you think that you're having this really like healthy, holistic product.
Yeah, so I guess when it comes to that, since there's so many types of mushrooms, you want to do a little bit of research. For example, I recommend turkey tail a lot because I see a lot of post-op surgery clients that have lymphatic fluid all over. It gets stuck, they get swollen. Turkey tail helps with fluid regulation. So it helps the lymphatic system, it helps the immune system, and it just balances everything out. So little things like that really, really help in my practice when I can't say, psilocybin, but the non-psychoactive ones, they all have a different purpose. Most of them just really help your immune system. That's something I found from all of them. It's like immune system, and which is the foundation to everything else. If we're not healthy, we can't function. So I like that.
Yeah, and I know you have done a little bit of activism around plant medicine, not just with mushrooms, but with cannabis as well. What's your hope as far as California regulations or even regulations in the United States goes surrounding these healing modalities?
I can only hope, because just like everything, there's the systematic ways of old men at the top who pocket in half of everything and tax the crap out of everything else. So, I mean, unfortunately, just like with cannabis, I see the mushroom industry going that way, which is why I really want to get a head start on things, because I saw how the cannabis industry went. So I want to make sure that the medicinal approach is pushed when it comes to my practice, my brand, and anything that surrounds myself with psilocybin. Because I don't know, when you approach it any other way, I believe that there's other plant medicines that are great for recreation, and mushroom medicine too. But even when you take it recreational, there's just so much healing that really, really legitimately happens inside of your body and your brain that, like you said, over time, we don't know what the real effects are. Every time I take a trip, I feel like I reach another level of evolution and awareness and connections to my community, to the earth. So we don't really know yet, but we can keep going and maybe find out.
I think also, like, if you're trying to take them recreationally, there's a chance that you're going to have a whole spiritual awakening during it. So just like
Right.
FYI, if you're not wanting to do that or you're not prepared to sign up for that, just know that, like, I don't know, in my experience, I've dabbled in other psychedelics. I have used cannabis
Yeah.
many times. I'm a huge proponent for cannabis, but mushrooms are just next level. Like when it comes to the spiritual connection that you will feel when you use them. That's just in my experience. But yeah, like if you're just doing it to have fun, you might get a lot more than
I mean,
that.
I know some people that have been like on mushrooms for a long time. They've dabbled in it for a very long time, to where they do just kind of, I need to clean my house. My mindset is not there. I'm just going to snack on some and get it done, which is a positive thing. I mean, oh my gosh, other than that, it would have stayed dirty. So it's all positive when it comes to it. I just really love how mushrooms work.
It's so funny you say that because my best friend started doing that. She's like, I hate cleaning my house, so when I have to do it, I just take a little microdose, I put on some music, and then I enjoy the process. So,
Yeah.
microdosing can be a way to use them more in a fun way, but I think if you're taking a large amount, you're going to have some sort of like whole spiritual process. Um, Speaking of spiritual process, I know something that you are hoping to do more of in the future and facilitate more of in the future is more ceremonial uses for mushrooms, bringing people together and taking them in a group setting. Why do you think that can be impactful?
I think it's just very transformational when you're in a group setting where everything is, you're in a safe space with a group, and more so because it was a ladies retreat. So, we're all ladies, we're out in the forest. We had already done some exercises throughout the day that kind of made us all much closer. We spoke about things that maybe we're not comfortable speaking about in other spaces. So we were already very connected before the ceremony. And once we took the mushrooms, which we did on the full moon on spring equinox, which was amazing, it just kind of it simmered everyone to the same frequency, and they were just happy. They were all just like, oh my gosh, like, because a lot of them had never experienced it before. So I remember in the beginning, one of the ladies kind of freaked out. She's like, oh my gosh, are we going to be running out in our underwear and blah, blah. And I'm just like, no, that's not. So some of the ladies were like, what's going to happen? But once we sat into the ceremony, we were all in a circle. Everything was calm. And after the mushrooms started to set in, we were around a fireplace. It was just beautiful. Everyone was calm. Some were kind of getting together and talking in different groups, but it was just such a serene setting. And everyone was, like I said, on the same frequency. So we were all just very connected, and a very nice, cozy moment for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's something we haven't really touched on. Not only in my experience, at least, and it sounds like in yours as well, do you feel connected to the earth and to nature and to your purpose here on this planet and this kind of like level of spiritual awareness you gain, but also you feel connected to the people you're with. It's like you said, you're on the same frequency, and it's like you can feel other people's energy more easily when you're on them. And I don't know, it's just such a connective experience, more than anything else I've ever had. Just extremely connective. And I think it comes back to the mycelium. We're getting into the network of mycelium. Yeah. I love people commenting as well. Someone says it could be great to treat all the illnesses with a holistic approach first. And it sounds like that is one of your goals or something that you try to do in your business too, right? Because you do cupping, you do massage, you do all sorts of things.
Yes, I do a little bit of everything. I've been in healthcare for over 10 years now. I worked in physical therapy. I worked in hospitals in Chicago. And yeah, after being in all that, I really just like what I'm doing now, the holistic approach, and being in my private practice, working one-on-one with people.
It's so beautiful to hear you talk about growing up in Mexico as well and how there's a holistic approach there. Do you feel more connected to your ancestry, kind of taking that holistic approach rather than subscribing to Western medicine first?
I do. And I had spoken to Reba about this, but I'm like, I don't know, something about Sacramento. Like, Cesar Chavez is around the corner. I live right next to Zapata Park. So it's like, there's something about me being here at this time that just feels like my purpose.
There's something really special about Sacramento right now. I can't put my finger on it, but I felt that too. And right when you said that, I got chills. Like the power, the energy here is super, super magical. And it makes me really excited to see just the community we're building too in Sacramento. The spiritual community is it's really beautiful. Jackie says, microdosing is how I was able to get off of the depression anxiety meds 4 years ago. After much research, tried it, and it transformed my life. I love hearing that. Yeah. Okay, is there anything else you want to touch on before we finish by pulling an oracle card?
No, I'll just reiterate that please know where your source is of everything that you're getting, down to your food, down to your water. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to pull from the Spirit Animal Oracle deck because we're talking all about nature and our connection to nature. So I figured we would get some guidance from a spirit animal. But while I do that, I want to pull up your website here because I want you to have an opportunity to just talk about your offerings, what you do, and if people live here in Sacramento, how you can support them. So this is a look at your website. Tell us more about your offerings.
Yeah, so I am in downtown Sacramento. I pretty much do all sorts of integrative body work. I have cups available if anyone wants cupping, but usually it's a lot of neuromuscular body work. So I like to do a full history assessment, health history, to see, if you guys have any scar tissue, past surgeries, recent falls, anything like that. I love to just discuss before having our first session. And then from there, we build a relationship. I get to know your body more and more, your lifestyle, because I have a lot of office athletes and they're always hunched over, very similar muscles. When someone walks in and tells me they sit on the computer, okay, shoulders, neck, traps. But yeah, and I also do energy work, Reiki, crystal grids. We start with a pendulum assessment, so we see where all of your chakras are. And then from there, we go on with a little bit of body work because I always like to relax the spine. The spine is like a big lightsaber where all of your energies lie. They're the most potent in your spine. So that's where I'll place the crystal grids depending on the pendulum assessment. And yeah.
I have to say, I love your approach. Oh, I think we just lost her. I might have just kicked her out. Well, what I was going to say is that I love her approach, and hopefully she can join us again because she has this like Aquarius energy that's all about the spiritual, it's all about the mind, it's all about the mental and doing things differently. But then her Taurus sun and Mercury are just so beautiful and grounded in the body, which is really, really amazing. So I love that. I'm so grateful she joined us. And like I said, I hope she can come back on. But we're going to go ahead and pull a card and see what comes through for all of us watching here today, and also for Tiffany, if she can catch the replay. Oh, it's not even Mercury retrograde yet, you guys. All right. Get grounded here. What do we need to know as we close out our conversation about mushrooms today? I knew we were going to pull this card. I knew it. It's turkey spirit. And I love how she talked about the turkey tail mushroom. I saw it when I was shuffling and I just knew we were going to pull it. Okay, it's card number 61. And the simple message there is give with gratitude and grace. Give with gratitude and grace. And here's what it says. Turkey Spirit's message for you is that you always have the potential for manifesting a rich reality, for the turkey represents generosity and a celebration of abundance through giving to others. Give freely without expectation, and you shall receive, for the manifestation of abundance is happening right now. Align with it by sharing your good fortune with others, whether you give money, loving guidance, the gift of listening, or kindness in any form. Immerse yourself in the flow of generous abundance, being a channel for turkey spirit and the desire of spirit to see all beings experience the blessing of plenty. Give with gratitude and grace from a wellspring of love and compassion, knowing that spirit will respond by giving you all that you need in this moment and all moments to come. So beautiful, reminding us of our abundance, reminding us to give with grace and have gratitude for everything already in our life so we can make space for even more of it. This has been such a beautiful conversation. I am so grateful to Tiffany for joining us. I'm going to give her one more minute to see if she wants to pop back on, but I know she has another appointment to get to. And before we go, I also just want to thank our sponsor for this show, AstroCharts. That's the site I used to pull up Tiffany's chart here. You can create a free account on astrocharts.com and save birth charts, your own chart, your friend's chart, your family's charts. I really love the aesthetic And they really just have the most beautiful birth charts that I have found on the internet. So very grateful to them for sponsoring our show and making this possible. She just texted me saying, the software just wasn't agreeing with my computer and I can't open anything right now. She said, I'm curious about my animal card though. So I'll have to pass along that we pulled Turkey Spirit, which is, again, just so perfect. And so grateful that Tiffany gave us her time today. She's an extremely busy person and she has so much important work she's doing, and just really a blessing to hear her experience and the knowledge she has about mushrooms too. And I'm so grateful that we learned from someone who spent a lot of time in Mexico, who has heritage in Mexico, and could share that connection that mushrooms have to Mexico. I had no idea. So before we go, I just want to share with you, this is how you can follow Tiffany at 717 Safe Space on Instagram, or you can check out her website at safespacebodywork.com. Both are great ways to get in touch with her. If you live in the Sacramento area, you're looking for someone to help you with your healing journey, she is a great person to do so. Thank you so much to everyone who showed up today, who came with an open mind, with curiosity. Thank you for sharing your own experiences with mushrooms and psychedelics. Jackie says, it's been one of the best things I've ever done for myself. They've been absolutely transformative. I'm grateful for every experience I've had. I've learned and grown in each. A great thought to wrap up on. Remember that if you are going to go down the rabbit hole of mushrooms, to make sure you're getting them from a source where you know how they're grown, you know what's in them, and make sure that if you've never done them before, you have someone to guide you through the journey and you're in a safe setting. Again, this is not medical advice, just us sharing our experiences and giving you a little more information if you are curious about the healing modalities and the medicinal properties of mushrooms as well, and the spiritual properties too. Thank you for being here. We will be back again next week with another episode of The Spiritual Journalist. I love you. I hope you have a beautiful week. And until I see you next, stay curious. Thank you so much for joining our discussion today. If you enjoyed this episode of The Spiritual Journalist, you can find more on thespiritualjournalist.com, or you can listen to our conversations wherever you enjoy podcasts. And if you want to learn more about astrology, join me live every weekday morning on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter for Transits Today, where we break down the energy of the day based on the movement of the planets and start our morning off in a high vibe. All of the information we share on The Spiritual Journalist is completely free to you. So if you'd like to support more content like this, the easiest way to do so is to subscribe to our YouTube page. Head over to the Spiritual Shop on our website and buy yourself a little something. Or if you're feeling extra generous, you can buy me a coffee to fuel future live streams. Just tap the link in the description or head to buymeacoffee.com and search The Spiritual Journalist. I'm so grateful you found us here, and I can't wait for our next conversation.